It's always a pleasure to have my friend Tom Cotton on, Senator from Arkansas. I think we're friends, don't you, Tom?
Absolutely, Mark. It's good to be back on with you. It's always great to listen to you and also to watch you on Fox. I want to congratulate you on the news today that I heard that you're going to have twice the show now coming soon on Fox, Saturday night and Sunday night. So congratulations. Your many viewers and listeners are very excited to hear the news.
Thank you. That just means you're going to have to appear more often. You understand that.
Glad to do it.
All right. The 14th Amendment, you sent me a note and you said, you know what, I really want to talk about this because this is so outrageous. And you do have a great background to talk about something like this, Senator Cotton. Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. They have these phony eggheads and all the rest of them out there, the Democrats pushing this latest really outrageous effort to disenfranchise tens of millions of people. What do you make of this?
Well, Mark, I think it's just the latest gambit by the Democrats to try to undermine Donald Trump and try to prevent him from returning to the White House, just like they tried to deny him the White House in the first place or take it away from him when he was in the White House. If you go back to the first campaign and the Russia collusion hoax, which continued into his administration, as soon as it ended, you went into the first impeachment with the Ukraine hoax. And then even, Mark, after he had left office in 2021, he was no longer in the White House. They wanted to dig him up and try to kill him again by impeaching him after he had left office for the sole purpose to prevent him from ever running again, probably because they knew how weak Joe Biden would be. And now they're at it again. Earlier this year, it was clear that Joe Biden was extremely weak. So what happened? You got 4 different indictments of Donald Trump. Yep, that didn't seem to damage him. He's still ahead or tied with Joe Biden in the polls. Joe Biden is showing historic weakness for an incumbent president. So what do? Now they're trying to disqualify Donald Trump using the 14th Amendment. The 14th Amendment says that if you committed insurrection or rebellion against the United States, you're not eligible for federal office. This is written in the aftermath of the Civil War. It was used then to ensure that unreconstructed Confederates could never serve in federal office again. Obviously, it doesn't apply today. Donald Trump hasn't been convicted of, much less even charged with insurrection. And we all know that if Jack Smith, the rabid zealot that Merrick Garland appointed to prosecute Donald Trump, could have charged insurrection, obviously he would have. But now you've got Democrats in places like Colorado who are talking about unilaterally through partisan state officers like a Secretary of State or Attorney General removing Donald Trump from the ballot in those states. This is a very, very dangerous road to go down, and I would suggest the Democrats, as I have from the very beginning about Donald Trump, and for that matter, any other Republican they don't like, they should simply try to beat him at the ballot box.
You know, it's amazing, Senator, you make great points. On the one hand, they say he's the easiest to beat. On the other hand, they're doing everything they can to bury him alive. What do you make of 91 charges, 4 different, really 1, 2, I guess 5 different grand juries, Democrat DAs, you have a Democrat regime special counsel. All the juries will be made up of largely anti-Trump Democrats. The judges are largely anti-Trump Democrats, not all, but most. Pretty bad, don't you think?
No, again, Mark, it gets back to the point about trying to stop Donald Trump by means other than simply defeating him at the ballot box. The Democrats could have pursued these charges at any time after he left office. Yet they waited until the spring and summer of 2023, and they're scheduling trials, for instance, as the radical Obama appointee in Washington, D.C. has done, the day before the Super Tuesday primaries. Mm-hmm. And that's because they know that Joe Biden is so weak, he's ruined our economy, that he's not mentally fit to be president. And the only way they may be able to prop him up is to criminally charge not just the former president, Mark. That's bad enough. That's banana republic kind of stuff. But Donald Trump is also the leading candidate of the opposition party. That is really banana republic style operation. That's something you see in Brazil or Pakistan or other countries, not in America. Again, this is a very dangerous precedent. That That water is already crossing under the bridge, though, and we should not be surprised to see Republican Attorney General or Republican DAs, for instance, who have had Hunter Biden or Jim Biden or even Joe Biden pass through their jurisdictions at some point in recent years, looking for opportunities to charge them with crimes, just as these Democratic prosecutors have looked at Donald Trump, much like Stalin's chief of secret police once said, "Show me the man and I'll find you the crime."
You know, there's an interesting piece, Senator, by Byron York in the Washington Examiner the other day. And I quote this to you. "A riot is the language of the unheard." On February 7, 2022, Senator Tom Cotton, a member of the Judiciary Committee, wrote a letter to Attorney General Merrick Garland. It was about the case of Montez Lee, a Rochester, Minnesota man sentenced to 10 years in prison for setting a fire that killed a man during Black Lives Matter riot in Minneapolis. You remember this case? And you remember what the Department of Justice did and why you were so upset about it?
No, I remember it very well. This is during the BLM riots of 2020. Many of your listeners may remember this terrible tragedy where a building was set fire and it killed a man who was inside it. It was a murder. This is not a looting, Mark. This is not, shoplifting, bad as those crimes are. This is cold-blooded homicide, setting fire to a building on purpose, committing an arson, and in the course of that, committing a murder. And given this perp's rap sheet, which is as long as your arm, the federal sentencing guidelines said he should have spent up to 20 years in prison. Yet the Biden Department of Justice, not his criminal defense lawyer, the Biden Department of Justice proposed to the judge that he only get 10 years because he may have committed arson that resulted in homicide, but, it was for a good cause. It was for racial justice. He was rioting because rioting is the language of the unheard. The Department of Justice actually wrote those words in its court filing. And, in fact, that's exactly what he got. He's going to be out on the streets walking free many years earlier than he should have because he shared Merrick Garland's and Joe Biden's politics and because, in their eyes, he had the right skin color. That is a travesty of justice, and it's an affront to his victim's family.
So BLM, Marxist, murders an individual by setting a building on fire, arson. Justice Department goes in, much like the Molotov cocktail Ivy League lawyers in New York, where they slash that sentence as a result of the request by the prosecutors of the Department of Justice. And then we have people who committed no acts of violence at all on January 6th, Senator, and they're throwing the book at them. I'd like to know your opinion about that. Folks, as listeners to my show, you're what I like to call a lifelong learner. And I know you're probably always looking for more ways to become a better educated citizen. That's why, as students head back to school, I encourage you to continue your own education and learn more about the founding principles that made our country the most prosperous nation in history. Now, to help you do that, my good friends at Hillsdale College send out Imprimis. That's their free digest of liberty. Millions of Americans, including me, receive the best of conservative thought in the mailbox every month. And right now, for a limited time, my listeners can sign up for free. Just go to levinforhillsdale.com, Levin for Hillsdale.com. In the pages of Imprimis, you get smart commentary on the big issues of our time. And I look forward to reading it every month, and you can too. You can learn more about Hillsdale College and Imprimis today. Go to levinforhillsdale.com. That's Levin for Hillsdale.com.
Mark Levin, the thunder on the right. Call in now, 877-381-3811.
You know, Tom Cotton, I look at these sentences some of these people are getting from January 6th, and I'm not talking about people who attacked cops. I'm talking about other people. Like they were in the building for about 15 minutes, didn't touch anything, and walked out. Some of these people are sent to jail right out of the box. Some of them are getting a year, 2 years. Some of them are getting 6 months, 18 months. What do you make of all this?
Yeah, Mark, we talked about going into break. I think it's a stark contrast to what this BLM rioter who committed an arson that led to homicide in Minnesota got, obviously. Supposed to get 20 years, getting 10 years instead. Stark contrast to what the Department of Justice almost gave the president's son, Hunter Biden. You have what is sometimes called the MAGA grandmas elderly men and women who came to Washington on January 6th because they weren't engaged in legitimate protest. You can agree with them, disagree with them. That doesn't matter. They were having the book thrown at them for being merely present, sometimes, Mark, just on Capitol grounds, much less the Capitol building, or being present in the Capitol building significant amounts of time after the riot first occurred and the Capitol building was entered. Some of them may not have even known they weren't allowed to be there. Many of them left once they learned they were. Yet, as you say, they're facing these silly, inflated charges on things like, obstructing or official proceeding, which frankly probably doesn't even apply anyway. And I expect these convictions to be overturned in the Supreme Court, or parading on public grounds without.
Hold on, I just want to explain that to the American people. The obstruction is based on that same damn 1512 that they're using against Trump. These are the post-Enron obstruction issues that have absolutely nothing to do with this.
Yeah. No, that's exactly right. Yeah, so the post-Enron law was written in a way that you can't destroy evidence or otherwise engage in obstruction of an official proceeding, like a court hearing, like a SEC commission hearing. It was not designed for people who were walking around the Capitol grounds on the day we were voting to certify the Electoral College. The D.C. Circuit Court of Appeals almost struck down those convictions. I wouldn't be surprised if the Supreme Court does. But one of the other charges these people are being charged with, Mark, is parading on public grounds without a permit. It shows you how far they're stretching the law. And my understanding is these are the vast majority of cases that go in this first bucket. We're not talking about the bucket of people who went onto public grounds and damaged public property, who breached the doors, who otherwise rioted and caused damage. And we're certainly not talking about people who committed acts of violence against law enforcement officers, who should have the book thrown at them, or committed acts of violence against other people. But the large majority of these cases, my understanding, is people who were merely present on the Capitol grounds or merely present in the Capitol. And like I said, in some cases, they weren't even aware that the Capitol was not open that day. But because you got Merrick Garland, who frequently boasts that this is the largest investigation that has ever occurred in the department history, larger than the effort to get al-Qaeda, larger than the effort to root out what was behind the BLM riots and the Antifa riots in the summer of 2020 that caused, billions of dollars worth of property damage and took many lives. No, they're turning their guns on grandmas who came to Washington wearing MAGA hats.
There was a young 22-year-old man who came with his uncle to Washington. And his uncle, was much more aggressive, more violent. This kid wasn't violent in the least. He goes into the building. He's got a Trump flag, on a pole. Doesn't touch a soul. Doesn't break a thing. Doesn't touch a police officer. And he goes in, and he takes the flag and the pole. He pushes it out the window for show. Then he brings it back in the window. Officer says to him, "You need to leave the building." He leaves the building. Senator, they charged him with 4 misdemeanors. You know what that 22-year-old did, Mr. Tom? What am I saying, Tom? You know what that 22-year-old did? He committed suicide. Yeah,
it's a terrible, terrible, tragic story. And it's an example, again, of how it's the opposite of prosecutorial discretion. In these cases, especially when you have this number of cases, you would expect prosecutors to conduct a kind of triage, focus on the worst cases, the cases of violence against law enforcement officers or other persons, cases of severe property damage, not these minor offenders who may not even realize they were offending at all. But again, it's all a political effort that is misallocating department resources, using tools to pursue people like the one you just described that, frankly, they don't even routinely use against drug dealers, hardened criminals that they would sooner let out on the street because they're engaging, as we said in the Minnesota case, of writing the language of the unheard.
Well, I want to thank you for everything you do. I want to thank you for your straightforwardness, intelligence, all the rest of it, your friendship. And keep up the good work, Senator Tom Cotton.
Thank you, Mark. Good to be on with you.